Look at me.
Sure.
Look at me.
Sure.
I'm the captain now.
Throughout history, wherever there has been oceanic trade, there have been pirates, seafarers who took advantage of the vastness of the open sea to plunder and operate complex criminal enterprises. Pirates have included everything from Norsemen raiding ships to notorious Caribbean figures like Blackbeard, who captured a French slave ship and upgraded it into a formidable pirate vessel. Most pirates were men from impoverished backgrounds, seeking wealth and a chance to rise socially. Others were motivated by the pursuit of fame, power, or glory, during a time when sailors had little standing in society. Over time, we've mythologized and romanticized pirates, turning them into legendary figures. But piracy didn't disappear. It's still a reality today. This map shows reported incidents of piracy over the last 40 years. It ranges from Indonesian pirates hijacking ships in the Strait of Malacca to Bangladeshi pirates taking fishermen hostage for ransom, and Nigerian pirates siphoning oil from tankers to sell illegally. Yet the majority of piracy incidents are concentrated around the entrance to the Suez Canal, one of the world's busiest trade routes, in an era where piracy has particularly flourished. Somalia is often considered the epitome of a failed state, with its modern history defined by the ongoing civil war that began in 1991. This conflict has claimed around 400,000 lives and displaced over 1 million people. From 1991 to 2012, Somalia essentially had no central government, only local authorities that came and went. This collapse affected all aspects of Somali life, severely impacting the military, education, healthcare, resources, and labor. However, in the West, Somalia is often remembered for one thing during this time: the infamous Somali Pirates.
Look at me.
Sure.
Look at me.
Sure.
I'm the captain now.
Somali piracy peaked in 2009. Yes, well into the 21st century when pirates were hijacking massive ships for ransom. But how did small speedboats manage to overpower these huge vessels? And why has this practice mostly ended, even though the civil war persists? A glance at Somalia's geography offers some clues. Despite sharing borders with Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia's largest frontier is its coastline, which stretches over 1,000 kilometers more than its land borders. This geographic setup naturally fosters a sea-based culture. On top of that, only 1.6% of Somaliland is farmable, with just 0.04% being used for permanent crops. With extreme weather patterns and torrential rains in the south and arid conditions in the north, Somalis have always depended heavily on fishing. The country's agricultural limitations leave fishing or importing food as the main options for survival. Turning to Somalia's recent history, the region was divided between Italian and British colonial rule during the scramble for Africa, with the British controlling a small northern territory. Wars of resistance and global conflicts caused instability, particularly in the Italian-held areas. By World War II, Britain had taken control of both regions, but granted them independence on July 1, 1960, following long-standing Somali unrest. Upon gaining independence, Somalia was divided between the more stable, fertile British-ruled north and the less developed rest of the country. After adopting a constitution, the nation quickly descended into turmoil with a rejected referendum, a presidential assassination, and a military coup. The new leader, Siad Barre, was a Marxist dictator with grand ideas for the country. Although his regime was corrupt, Barre significantly boosted literacy rates and launched infrastructure projects. His nationalism eventually led to a war with Ethiopia over the Ogaden region, which was home to ethnic Somalis. Initially, Somalia nearly won, controlling 90% of the disputed territory. But the tide turned when the Soviets shifted their support to Ethiopia. With help from Cuban forces, Ethiopia pushed Somalia back to its borders. This defeat marked a turning point in Somali history. The country severed ties with the Soviets and refused outside help. But domestic rebellions supported by Ethiopia began to spread. Barre's response was to become even more authoritarian, but by 1991 his government collapsed and he fled the country. This rapid transition from dictatorship to anarchy set the stage for the chaos that followed, as no one stepped up to replace Barre. The government and military disintegrated into factions, food prices skyrocketed, and Somaliland declared its independence. avoiding much of the violence and instability. Despite the ongoing war, fishing remained a crucial part of Somali life, even as the central government and navy ceased to function. With no authority to protect Somalia's territorial waters, foreign fishing vessels began illegally depleting Somali's fish stocks. In response, the local fishermen and ex-soldiers banded together to defend their waters, which soon escalated into holding these foreign boats for ransom using small motorboats. What began as a local effort to protect resources quickly evolved into full-scale piracy, with Somalis targeting larger commercial vessels. Pirates would set out in speedboats, tracking ships with GPS devices, and attack using firearms or rocket-propelled grenades. Once aboard, they would seize control of the ship, holding the crew hostage while negotiating ransom payments with the ship owners.
If there's no answer to payment of the ransom within 3 days, then the kidnappers here will sell me to Al-Shabaab.
Most ransoms were paid, and the crew was released after an average of 45 days. Between 2005 and 2012, piracy surged. The attacks on the cargo ships, fishing boats, and even cruise liners. A makeshift stock market emerged in the town of Haradir, where investors could buy and sell shares in pirate missions. The first major victim was the MS Feisty Gas, a Hong Kong petroleum tanker, while the first fatality occurred on the Taiwanese FV Qingfenghua 168, when a crew member was killed after ransom demands went unmet. Piracy cost the global economy about $7 billion annually, with ransoms averaging $2 million. This chaos couldn't go unchecked. The Red Sea, a crucial link between Europe and Asia, was vital to global trade, and disruptions affected countries around the world, particularly Egypt, due to its proximity to the Suez Canal. In response, the United States and 32 other nations formed Combined Task Force 150 and 151 to combat piracy, based out of a US Navy base in Bahrain. China also set up its only overseas naval base in Djibouti to help secure the area. However, international forces initially couldn't enter Somali waters, leading the US Security Council to pass a resolution in 2008 permitting nations to intervene with Somali government consent. Despite this intervention, many pirates evaded capture, as they hadn't technically committed a crime unless they opened fire. Nevertheless, by 2012, piracy had dramatically declined, with attempted hijackings dropping from 237 in 2011 to just 75 the following year. The establishment of semi-autonomous regions like Puntland and Makir likely contributed to the reduction, as did the formation of a Somali federal government in 2012, bringing some order after decades of anarchy. The last significant pirate attacks occurred in 2017 and 2018, both unsuccessful. While piracy has largely faded, there's still uncertainty about its future. The US has shifted its focus away from the Middle East, given its increased energy independence, but other nations still have a vested interest in maintaining stability in the region. The Somali civil war has had far-reaching consequences on global trade, demonstrating the interconnectedness of the world. It took a concerted international effort to curb piracy, which at its height resembled the 1700s Caribbean. With the civil war still raging in southern Somalia and the US pulling back, it's possible that Somali pirates could make a comeback.